So I live such a cool life. You would not believe. I mean, it is so good. I'm going to start off by telling you what I do every day. I get up in the morning at between 4:30 and 5. I come downstairs, and my cat sleeps with me. So the cat and I come downstairs, and I feed the cat, and I have my first cup of coffee, and then I begin my day's work. My day's work consists of writing 5 pages. I've been doing that since, the ark had landed for a long time. for a long time. The end of 2010, I received a call from the Children's Book Council and the Every Child a Reader Foundation, asking me would I consider becoming the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. And I said, what does that consist of? And they said, no, you encourage people to read, and I said, I can do that. I had a different idea of what it was going to be about, but I went down to Washington, the Library of Congress, and they gave me this very lovely medal. You can touch it later. But if you touch it, it means we're dating. Right? So I've got my medal, and what I thought I would be doing was riding a rather large white horse and saying, "Come on and read, come on," and everybody would read and say, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." It hasn't been that easy. It has not been that easy, and my reasons for, some people don't understand what people not being literate means. They think, oh, they prefer not to read. No, they're people who are functionally illiterate. They cannot handle language. They cannot handle reading in a way that is going to allow them to function in our society. And that is a shame. And there are really 2 problems. The first problem, it occurs between the ages of birth and 5 years. Many children are being raised in linguistically impoverished environments. I mean, so these children actually begin school up to 15 to 18 months behind. That is an enormous difference. There are families whose kids come to school with a working vocabulary of between 30,000 and 40,000 words, and other kids come to school with a working vocabulary of 150 to 200,000 words. Is that a huge difference? Say yes. Yes. Glad you agree with me. It's a huge difference. And there is a world of research that's been done. There's a world of research. Monique Seneschal in Canada, Leslie Morrow in New Jersey, people in Kansas. What they're saying is that only 20% or less ever catch up. 20% or less. So you have this enormous difficulty, this enormous problem as kids start school. And what happens, the kids, even if you give them a head start, they are still existing in the same language-deprived communities. And it's dreadful. It's dreadful. And it's happening now from a public policy point of view. do you deal with these kids? Well, you know, there's this tendency not to deal with the poor people, not to deal with the people who are behind. Well, we want to deal with the movers and shakers. Now, why is why does this gap exist? Well, the language, let me go back a little bit. My dad could not read or write, couldn't read or write. But he lived in an era wherein there were jobs to be had for people who could not read and write. My father was a janitor. He worked for the same company for 36 years. No jobs exist now for 36 years. Now, if a job exists for 36 months, you're lucky. No? When my father was not working for the janitor, in his janitor job, he worked for U.S. Radium Corporation. And they used to paint clock dials. The girls used to get sick and died of cancer from wetting the brushes with their tongues. It took them years to get the cancer. Well, at any rate, different story. He used to also work on the docks. On the docks, he was lift that barge, tote that bale, but he prided himself on the fact that he was a worker and that his family never went hungry. His family was never hungry. They were never homeless. Man could not read or write. No? So now, those jobs don't exist anymore. What we don't realize at times is that most of the vocabulary that enters their home comes from the workplace. Now, in the last election, there was this, people made a whole bunch out of this Mitt Romney statement about how many people worked in this country. But fewer and fewer people working in this country. Forget what he meant by it. What I brought away from that was that we're losing that vocabulary that comes from the workplace. Now, I have two sons, good son, bad son. They're both bigger than me, so, and, the good son, who is about an inch taller than I am, used to see me go out to work every single day. I talked to him about my job. I worked in publishing. I talked to him about different jobs. The bad son never saw me go out to work because I had stopped working at the time. You know, I mean, and he's 6'7", huge dude, big wide shoulders, huge. He wears a 15.5 shoe. Doesn't play a stick of basketball. Go figure. But what he heard from me is about my writing life. And he heard from his mama about her painting. What does he do? He writes and he paints. He's done 14 books. My other son, who just heard about my reading and what have you, is a minister. So whatever they picked up in the house, the momentum came from the parents. Right. Problem number one, from 0 to 5, the schools are burdened with the idea of we have to teach these kids in spite of their home environments. One of the things that's happened over the last 15 years is you have fewer families intact. So there are women, I go to juvenile prisons. I was at a juvenile prison and I spoke to two 14-year-olds. And I would say, what's the hardest thing about being in prison? And both of them said at the same time, not knowing where your children are. 14-year-olds. What are they going to give to those children as they bring them up? I go to prisons, I go to group homes, and I find 12 and 14-year-old kids raising 3 and 4-year-old kids. All right. So the next problem, when the kid gets to be 11 and 12 years old, they become discouraged. When we say to the kids, you know what's going to happen to you if you don't get your act together, and if you don't do this, you don't do that, you didn't do your homework, those kids believe that. And they understand that, and they are discouraged, and they give up. And they don't say, oh, I give up. They say, reading is boring. Books are boring. You're boring, teacher. You know? They say, you're boring, books are boring. I don't accept that. I know what's going on with these kids. No, I lived through that. Now, as a kid, my mom read to me. From the time I was adopted at 3. My real name is Walter Milton Myers. My adopted name is Walter Dean Myers. I was raised by the Dean family. When it's informal adoptions that we all know about. My mom used to read to me, every other day. But what she read were comic books and true romance. And that was the level of her reading. She read on the 3rd grade level. That's what she could read. And so I'm reading all these stories about these, John looked into Mary's eyes, and her eyes twinkled, and then there was a lot of heaving bosoms, so I asked my mom, what's a bosom? And she showed me the general part of my anatomy, and I looked in the mirror and tried to get it to heave, but I wasn't doing it. So, but when you speak to people, to too many educators, they have different ideas. They say, I think that you can't reverse this because the families don't care. Families care. People care. You have to teach them what to do and how to do it because they care. Then there are a lot of people who are saying, maybe this is happening because the children don't have the intellectual capability of learning to read. And that's nonsense. We have a history in this country of any time you encourage people to do better and convince them that they can do better, they will do better. So what I've been doing for last year was an impossible year for me. It was just the worst year of my life. My wife is an old lady. No, she's a year younger than me, but I think she's getting old. And she's one of these people who never complains. So last year she wanted to have things fixed around the house, and I said, "Oh, go ahead, love, go ahead. Now I'm going to be working on all my books, and you do what you want to do." And so she decided to have the kitchen remodeled and her knee replaced. It was interesting because now I'm running around as national ambassador. I'm doing like 30 gigs a year running around, and she's had her knee replaced. The guys, I remember one day I'm ready to leave. There's a car outside ready to take me to the airport, and there's a physical therapist in the living room manipulating her knee, and the guys are in in the kitchen, they're banging her away. And then one day, there was a physical therapist in the kitchen banging her away. And there was, it was a difficult year. But what I have been doing is trying to figure out how to get young people on track. On track. I know I have to involve parents. Not parents, guardians, grandmothers, foster parents, uncles, aunts. I have to involve these people. But I also have to involve the kids. Because I began looking at these kids, and I began saying things to them, and I realized they didn't know what I was talking about. And I said to a kid, if you read, you'll have a better life. And they said, oh, good. What kind of car do you drive? It so happens I don't drive. My wife doesn't let me drive because I daydream. So then it was, what kind of a watch do you wear? These kids don't understand what a better life is. And they don't understand what a better life is. And I'm thinking about this, They know in terms of you make more money. So if I tell a kid, say, well, I've got $2 million in Bank of America, which I do. We need a loan, you see me later. They understand that. But that is not going to get them to read. They say, well, maybe I can play ball, or maybe I can do a rap CD or something like that. They don't understand what a better life is. And I began thinking about that. I did not get my start because I was thinking of a better life. I wasn't thinking of a better life at 4. I was thinking of heaving bosoms. I got my momentum from that woman reading to me as best she could. I got my morals from my father, who I didn't know couldn't read until he was dead. So we have to convince kids that there are reasons to read. Who was it? Virginia Woolf, I think it was, that said that a book is like a frigate. It can take you around the world. He doesn't care about that. You say a book can take you to far-off places. I don't want to go to far-off places. This is cool. So why? So now I'm writing a book, trying to teach kids what a better life is. What is it? What is a better life? What can you look forward to? The things that I got from around the kitchen table, which I didn't understand I got from around the kitchen table for 35, 40 years. I thought I was born reading. But there are things that we can teach. We can teach things. We can teach not young people, but guardians how to help. People are producing books. A book I particularly love is this one called Tuck Me In. It's a marvelous book. First time I saw this book, I loved it. I loved it. And anyone whoever was born the closest to August 12th, I would give this book to. This is a marvelous book because it says, who needs to be tucked in? And it's time for bed. Who needs to be tucked in? I do, says the little piggy. And you turn the page, and the page becomes a blanket to tuck the kid in. Aww. But look how easy it is to involve the kid with the book. Good night, baby pig. Who else needs to be tucked in? I do, says the zebra. And I show this book to grandparents, and they know, no matter how poorly they read, that they can involve their kids with this kind of a book. And he's tucked in. Oh, this is marvelous. Scholastic is doing interactive books, which they are ironing out the last things, in which a young reader can touch any word, and there's a definition of that word comes up, or a pronunciation of that word. This interactive kinds of things we can teach parents who are deficient in their education themselves what they can do, what they can do. And what I am doing, besides my own writing, I'm now working on 5 books. Actually, I've published 100 books. I've published, yeah, I go crank, you know, I mean, it's just like, what we can do is to convince guardians that they can help. There is a gift to be given, and they can give it. There was a group of Reading is Fundamental mothers on the West Coast, and the guy brought these books, not perhaps this particular book, but others similar to them, explained to them how to teach reading to their infants, how to talk to their children. My mother used to talk to me. She used to say to me, go to the window and decide what we're going to wear when we cross 125th Street today. And I would go there, and it was my little 4-year-old wisdom, say, if we need a raincoat, if we need something, you know. I wasn't the brightest kid, but I was very cute. And I got reading from this woman, and I've been running with it ever since. And this is the best life possible. I mean, I have found the good life, and I have it locked up. This is it. I make a lot of money. You know, my kids are absolutely stunned at how much money I make. I have a good life. I do what I want to do. This afternoon, my editor back in New York found out that I was in Little Rock and called and said, write something about the Little Rock Nine. You know, I said, no, maybe I will, if she offers me enough money. So this is what I do. Perhaps you would like to know something else about me. I think we're going to have a question and answer period. As I said, I write 5 pages a day. I outline everything I write. So before I came here today, I was in the hotel room working with my outlines. I outline. I don't have writer's block because I outline everything. I have book contracts from now until 2018. I should live so long. Now, I mean, I'd be glad if I lived so long. I sort of plan to live that long. No. Someone asked me, a kid asked me, what would I do? Do I ever plan to retire? And I said, that would be nice. I could retire. But then I would have to do my hobby, which is writing. No. But I figured out, because I'm very astute, that I would know I was retired because I would be sending back the checks. I don't think so. I'm working on a self-help book, trying to figure out how kids, how to convince kids what a good life is. Giving them a reason to read, not from an adult point of view. That I used to tell my sons that if you can read well, you'll get a better wife. And I would go through all the marriage announcements, and they would say, Miss Jones, college graduate, married Harry Smith, college graduate. You know. You didn't find Miss Jones, college graduate, marrying high school dropout unless he was a basketball player. I'm writing a book on that. I'm writing a book about multinational corporations. Multinational corporations are scary in that they set out to create products, but they also accumulate power. It's like in the 15th century, the caravels, the invention of the caravel, these wonderful ships that could go from Europe to North America and to Africa. And here was a chance to grow and expand the entire world. And the people who took advantage of these caravels were the people with the greatest self-interest. And what they did was to invent colonialism and slavery. So it's, and many of these, so I'm writing something about that. I'm writing about, I'm doing a series of gifted children, because someone said I don't write about gifted children, so I'm doing a series about gifted children. And I'm doing a book on the first African-American female doctor, which is fun. This is the greatest job you can imagine. The only thing I have to keep my wife happy. She's easy because she's old. Don't spread that around. And a cat. You know, I have a cat that I have to keep happy. I'm also interested. Someone asked me, where did I get my ideas? And where I get my ideas, I don't change ideas. The ideas mature. The ideas mature. So I've done books on bullying. I've done books on Columbine type things. I did. After Columbine, I went out to Colorado, and I interviewed hundreds of kids, you know, and I wanted to see how could Columbine happen. And I had interviewed dozens of kids in Brooklyn, you know, which is a tough neighborhood, you know, talk to kids, you know. And the kids from Brooklyn seem much less stable. They seem like, half of them had records. Kids in Columbine had nothing going on like that. The only difference was, when you asked the kids in Brooklyn, how many of you have guns in the house? Maybe one would raise their hand. But when you asked the kids in Columbine, how many kids? 95% of them had guns. So if there's any errant behavior.
Okay. We do have time for some questions, so if you have any, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. Kayla?
Thank you for coming. My name is Kayla Brooks. I'm a first-year student here at the Clinton School, and my question is, given that a lot of the individuals who make up the poverty numbers are children, what role do you see literacy in poverty alleviation in the U.S.?
And poverty? You know, it's a major problem in that traditionally, as the economy fluctuates, then the fortunes of the people fluctuate. Today, as the economy fluctuates, people are being left out. And we need, you know, there's a balance. We need fewer and fewer people to do the same jobs. And I think that the only people who are going to be able to survive over the next few decades are the people who have every skill imaginable. You know, and as bad as it might seem here, Lord, it's worse in England. It is worse in England. You go to, and I live in England 5 weeks a year. In England, the labor force participation rate is very small. You go outside of central London and you go to communities in which very few of the people are working. And you hear about the GCSE levels and the A levels, they're going down and down and down. And those people have a very, very difficult time re-engaging the economy and re-engaging the labor force.
Who was your inspiration when you were growing up?
My inspiration. Well, let's see. There was Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle. I wanted to be a sports person. I was interested in sports primarily. I didn't have the kinds of role models that you might hope. Langston Hughes came to my church. I didn't like it. Because he came to my church, that meant that all the kids had to keep quiet because some dude was going to read. Josephine Baker came to, I went to a La-di-da Presbyterian church. And only because it was on the same block, that's all. And they had a summer Bible school, and I had to go to summer Bible school. Josephine Baker came, and we had to listen. We had to stop playing ball and listen to some person sing, and she didn't sing in English. So she doesn't know English. What's wrong with her? No, I was fortunate enough to get reading down pat. And reading, for me, gave me other parts of my life. So when I read Robin Hood, I wanted to be Little John. When David fought Goliath, I thought if David got killed, I'd be his backup. When I was having trouble with my mom, because my mom was not doing well, I remember reading a portrait of the artist as a young man, and James Joyce wrote was his character who wouldn't pray with his mother, you know. And I said, yeah, right, I understand that. So I had these things going on, but just to have a role model, I didn't have one.
Yes, ma'am. In the red.
I have two questions that are related, sort of. I'm not a writer by any chance, but how do you decide on your titles? Do you write the work first and then entitle it, or do you title it and then write it? I'm just curious.
I give it a title, give it to my publisher, and then they change the title to what they want. Of the 105 titles that I've published, I might have named 5. Because, you know, I'm not good at that. And the marketing people have more and more say about your titles. And since they're paying me the money, you know, I just finished a book on the invasion of Normandy, you know, and which I really enjoyed working on. And I said, I think I'll call it The Invasion of Normandy. They changed the title, you know. And you know, since they're paying the money, yeah.
Hi, my name's Sean, and I'm a student at the Clinton School. And me and 3 of my teammates are on Literacy Action of Central Arkansas's practicum team. That's our project for the year. So I wanted to ask you, since I'm trying to figure this out, what is it going to take to get people aware of the issue of adult literacy, to get them to care about it, and to get them to take action about it? Because 93 million adults in this country read at or below 5th grade level, almost 40% of adults in the country, and our real literacy rate is more like 86% than 99% that we always see cited. So what do we do about this?
What I found is that if you go to legislators, if you go to senators and congressmen, and you say, can you give us money for the program, they say no. No, they say, and they don't believe that the money will be well spent. But I found that when I go to the private sector and I ask them for books, if I can go to a company and ask them to say, give me $25,000 for books, and they'll say yes, because it's a very clear thing, and you can make this distribution. And so what I'm trying to do is to start a learning center in a number of learning centers. I want to do, say, right in the middle of Harlem, I'll do a learning center wherein there would be books available and iPods. So you have the interaction, because private companies will give you money for concrete things like that, and they can write that off. Wherein elected officials always lag behind, and because they're going to be held responsible for that money, and so much of it is going to be lost. But if they can say, I was in Racine, Wisconsin, and the Johnson company was sponsoring me. Johnson makes Pledge, Raid. In the hotel room they had a basket. I thought, oh, good fruit. No, it was Raid. What is this? But when you ask them for money for books and stuff like this, they say yes. They say yes. And so I think, even if I can ask for something which is concrete, books, iPods, I think that they will give you the money, and they would be more supportive than they are of programs, because so many programs, like the Head Start program, they don't see a tangible return. So what I need to do is to go around them and see what will they give me, and how can I use that. Hope to help.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Williams. I'm a facilitator for Arkansas Partnerships for Preschool Literary Education. That's Apple, in case you wondered. But anyway, I was wondering about illustrating. I noticed that you mentioned, or she mentioned, that you like pictures. Do you have pictures in your books, or do you, when you write for children, do you illustrate your own, or do you have others do that?
Well, sometimes my son does. My son's an illustrator, so he's working on some of my books. I did a couple of books with, I think 5 books of photographs. I have 10,000 photographs, and of African American life between 1850 and 1940. Right, all over the house, right? My wife's trying to catalog them. What a job, you know. So right now I am planning a book on labor. And so 2 books, one on black labor. So I have these photographs of people doing everything from being jockeys to riverboat pilots, and I'm doing a thing on black aviators. So I'm using the books. I also have a collection of early schools, sod house schools with all kinds of kids. So I'm trying to now with the aviators, what we're doing. My wife is working even as we speak. No, she's not. She's sleeping. She's taking the photographs, dropping out the gray tones, and colorizing them. You know, just so they're real photographs, but it makes them interesting to the kids. And the kids really like that. And I'm also finding that the publishers now have a lot of facility to use photographs and pictures in very interesting ways.
Nicole?
Hello, I'm Nicole Maddox. I'm a student here at the Clinton School. I am a former math and science teacher, so I really thank you for the work that you have done and contributed to the world. I have seen your books in many libraries, but more importantly in the hands of African American boys, and I just want to thank you for that. So often we are not portrayed in a positive way, and it makes a huge difference for them to go to the library and to be able to pick up a book with a face that looks like them. So thank you for that. My question is for the young readers in the audience, if you could speak to them about what they can be doing now. When you pulled out the book, Ramsey jumped up on his feet and he said, "We have that book at school," and he was so excited. So if you could talk to them for a moment and just give them some advice on whether or not they're aspiring to be artists or they enjoy the work that you do, what can they be doing now to get to where you are? Thank you.
To compete with me. First, let me say, I was at a trial, and I got to lots of trials, and so there was this trial. This young kid was on trial, and the kid was sitting at one desk with his lawyer, and there was at the other desk was the prosecutor, and the courtroom was virtually empty. So there was a break, and I walked over to the defense attorney, and I said, "Oh, gee, it must be," just to have something to say, "it must be difficult to get the money together to hire detectives to get evidence for this kid." He says, the defense lawyer said, "That's not my problem. My problem is to humanize this kid in the eyes of the jury and the judge, to humanize the kid." And so what my books do, as you suggested, because they can pick up a book, my books don't have to be that good, but if they recognize their own lives, because books transmit values. Books transmit values. And so when you have a book, and you find yourself in that book, you have value. When I was coming up as a 14-year-old, I read everything. You know, I read Balzac, I read philosophy, and I could read everything. But I never found myself in books. I never found myself. And I spoke to James Baldwin. His was the first book I picked up, that was my neighborhood in that book. And he said he had the same experience. So what Baldwin did was and Richard Wright and all these guys from that era, they all went to Paris. They became expatriates. So, you know, what I would suggest for young people is to write and tell your story. Write and tell your story, because your story is important. And I will also say that to older people. I worked with people in Irving, Texas, some kids. I worked with kids who were 15 and 16 by Skype. And I had them do a project in which a 15-page paper, In the first 10 pages, they were to take and do a family history. You know? And they could use photographs, documents, but to do a family history. And I gave them a list of questions to ask. Then the last 5 pages, they were to write about how they fit into that family history. Well, it started off with 15 pages. Oh, 15 pages. Now, I'll be dead before I finish. But it ended up when these kids wrote individual letters to me saying, thank you, because they had no idea what their family history was all about. These kids had no idea what their parents had gone through. They had no idea that their parents, their mothers worked as kids. They had no idea, you know. So, you know, begin with your family history. Begin with that family history and write. You know?
I'm Janet Keller, and I'm just here as a mom of an avid reader and
Okay.
the librarian that helped get her there.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what you're thinking about the long-term impact of Kindles and the technological that they have, because to me the touch that goes with turning the page and the covering the, you know, tuck me in is important as well, especially with little children. Pat the bunny kind of things, you know, those books.
Okay. The Kindle, well, my wife has the Nook, right? The Nook. And that's primitive. You know, in a couple of years, that is going to, you're going to look back at that and say, oh, it's like a dial telephone. You know, I mean, that is primitive to what they're coming out with next. You know, I've seen some marvelous stuff coming up, and it's not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, it's not my cup of tea, because I still, if I see something on the computer, I print it up. Now, nothing is worse in my life than this paperless concept, because I download everything. I print up 300-page books. I can't sit there and read them. But I think that there are 2 problems. One problem is that I'm seeing that people are not investing in it for some kids. So, I mean, my kid, if my kids were young now, I would buy them something like that, you know. But too many kids are not getting it, you know. I mean, if you get something and you break it, that's $120, you know, and so it's a two-way street, but it will get better. I think it will get better, you know. I mean, and if no dude like me thinks it's going to be better, it might.
Last one, right there. Right, yep, right in front of me. Yeah.
Okay. My interest, even when I was teaching science, was at the end of the day. My students, I had several students who had nowhere to go. So that was of interest, and so that was the rest of my school day, was being with them and doing things with them. And as I am at a volunteer stage at this point, I've been trying to volunteer to be with children at the end of their school day, to read, help with math, anything. And I'm finding it really hard to get access. I've gone through the training, I've gone through everything to get access into my school district to help out that way.
Well, it's difficult because people are looking at some of these the programs from the point of view of how do you fund the program. And what I need to do, what I'm trying to do, is to get large corporations to do mini operations. You know, like instead of funding the New York City, I can fund, in New York, Mayor Bloomberg just gave $1 billion to Johns Hopkins. Now, well, I could get $1 million from him for maybe an after-school center, which is a literary-based after-school center. Many of these companies have that. I think that we need to get to change the approach and to look at what people, how much money is being wasted on some of these programs, and really kind of, even the bureaucracy. I mean, I was at my local university. I wanted to start a magazine for young writers, and I had the interest, I had the writers, I had teacher volunteers, and I had someone who was going to fund it. And there was so much red tape because who was going to get credit, whose name was going to be here, whose name was going to be there. We had to have 47 bids, and by African American people who have just been bar mitzvahed or something. I mean, it was just the red tape was just so dreadful, you know, and I couldn't get it. Though I had, you know, so you have to look at this kind of background and be creative. I can't go to someone and say, just because it's good, you should do it. Just because it's good doesn't work anymore.
Well, thank you so much for making the trip to Arkansas. Thank all you.